All right, and welcome to the next video in this series, where today we're going to talk about threat research, right? So to get right into it, let's assume a scenario, right, in which a malware attack has taken place on a file server. So after the attack has been determined, we found traces of the malware in the log files, which contains events related to malware. So it's then, of course, the cyber professional's responsibility to research that threats for possible remediation. So we first, of course, have to look for, as far as what I've just mentioned, indicators of compromise, right, or IOC. So when these events take place, they're also used for forensic purposes, right? So where investigators can determine activity performed by malware or any other type of attack, right? Not just malware. So several recent versions of anti-malware applications have the capability of identifying or using IOCs, right? So it can be used to determine breaches or any other type of security threat within the system, right? So with the help of IOC, threat researchers can determine the behavior of specific malware and its working methodologies, or if it's using just one methodology. Okay. So it can then be shared with other organizations, right, in the form of threat intelligence, which can help in improving the threat response, right, and the remediation methods. So there are various types of IOCs, unusual network traffic, whether it's inbound or outbound, unusual activities performed by administrator or privileged user accounts, unusual changes in OSs or registries, unusual connections established from, and unusual DNS modifications of requests and untimely system patching. So when this information is gathered, right, whether, when a indicator of compromise has been detected, right, and then the information is gathered through threat intelligence, through research, see exactly what's happened, if there's evidence of malware on the log files, right? Then what happens is, once it reaches a certain threshold, it gets reported to cyber companies, right? Or it gets reported, published, right? And then it's given a score, right? This CVSS score, Common Vulnerability Scoring System, right? So when you find several vulnerabilities within an infrastructure, you may not know how to rank them or assign scores to them, but the CVSS helps us score to each of vulnerability, right? It's kind of similar to my previous videos of when we did a scan with Nessus and the DDub scan, and it gave us different severities of the vulnerabilities that were found through the scan, right? So for example, if we have a vulnerability that is a risk to confidentiality, integrity, or availability, the CIA triad, of course, of your data, using CVSS can determine the score of each. So scores are calculated based on several metrics, right? So once we define these metrics, we'll be able to determine the score of a vulnerability. For example, and also it goes on the scale from, I believe, 1 to 10, 0 to 10, or 1 to 10, right? And of course, 10 being the highest as far as making it the most severe, usually a 10 meaning that it's exploited in the wild, right? Actively being exploited at the moment, right? Usually when it's in an 8 to 9 range, it's probably a high probability of it being exploited. We just haven't discovered it yet. But of course, being on the 10 or the higher range would make it very severe. And we can also use the calculators to help us calculate those scores, right? So now what I'm going to do is show us how we can calculate or determine a CVSS score. So let's connect to Edge, right? So if it loads for me. All right, so let's see. Got it. I should have had it up already, actually. Then don't you hate that we start typing in? Something else is there. CVSS. There it is. Perfect. All right, so now we see the CVSS version 3.0 calculator displayed on the web page here, right? So in the base score, let's take a look here. All right, so the base score, we have a few following metrics. I'll I'll click on a few. So we have attack vector, which means where the attack came from, right? And then let's see, the complexity, it's high, which means it was very complex attack. And then let's see, privilege, we'll just say low. UI, we'll say none. And then the scope, unchanged. Confidentiality, say you're pretty high. Integrity, pretty high. Availability, pretty high. So it automatically gives us, it calculates based off these qualifiers here exactly what score that it should be given, which is pretty high on the scale. You could even guess that based off the high confidentiality and integrity alone. Then when you're talking about availability, it's potential impacts to running the business, right? So we can, I mean, you can actually head to the website if you want to play around with this, you know, to get different scores and how they calculate the scores as far as environmental, temporal score, you know, modified attack vector, things of that nature, right? So let's actually try another one. Let's see, low confidentiality. Let's see, low integrity. They're low availability, right? So now we see it change to a 5, which is pretty even. I mean, it's something you may want to take care of, something you may not. Like it's one of those that's like lower on the total pole if it's not impacting day-to-day business and it's not being actively exploited. It's something that can be not necessarily thrown on the back burner, but something that we can push a little bit further on down the line. It's not something that we have to take care of at this very moment. All right. So now we can talk about threat modeling methodologies, right? So it's a method in which an organization, right, can identify potential threats and provide insights to implement appropriate security controls, right, to mitigate these sort of threats we're speaking of. So these methodologies can help a great deal to identify appropriate security controls due to which several threats can emerge within an organization. And these security controls are pretty different depending on the sector that you're in, right? So we're going to talk a bit about adversary capability, total attack surface, attack vector, the impact and likelihood, right? So just a little bit on the total attack surface. It's like an entry point that could be used by an attacker to get into a network of an organization. It's pretty much a vulnerable point that could be exploited by a threat actor. An attack vector is someone who conducts an attack, and threat agents can use various methods. The impact of the threat can vary from case to case, which we see here through the CVSS as far as the type of impact that it has based off of these indicators as far as what's affecting, how it's affecting rather the business or the enterprise to generate the scores so we can know what the, if it's low or medium high impact, right? Then the threat likelihood is the probability of a threat to occur. That will be a possibility. There are some threats that are more likely than others, of course. So you review historical statistics, especially when you're in a particular sector and you're doing some threat research and you see, you work for a hospital, right? And you see a lot of other hospitals, let's say 3 to 4 other hospitals across the nation or pretty close to you have been exploited, right? Through similar means of methodologies that threat actors have used. You might want to take their research to have proper security controls in place to best manage your enterprise to be able to be safeguarded from that, right? As far as the likelihood of that happening to you guys, that you guys are well prepared, right? So now we can get into threat intelligence sharing with supported functions, right? So it's a method or process that's used by an organization to gather and analyze information that may have either faced in the past or likely to face in the future. Kind of piggybacking on what I've just mentioned, right? As far as likelihood, right? So threat intelligence, it typically helps an organization to gain insights into different types of threats and the impacts of such, right? So we're actually going to take a look into some of this, you know, risk management, vulnerability management throughout a few videos here that I'm going to produce. But that'll be the end of this video as far as supporting organizational securities. And I will see you in the next one.